Let me go to Super Bowl 58 last night more specifically and ask you if there was a defining moment that I mean outside of the winning play itself that
Yeah.
made you believe what ended up happening was inevitably going to happen. What was it? Because I got to admit, I was very, very worried in the first half
Yeah.
when I saw, and I said to myself, what is wrong with Andy Reid? He doesn't seem to be himself. How the
Yeah.
hell has Travis Kelsey got one target for one
Yep.
reception for 1 yard in an entire first half? This is one of the greatest tight ends in the history of football and a
hmm
four-time All-Pro. What the hell is going on here? I didn't know what was going on. What stood out in your mind?
I think look, when San Fran had been stoning Kansas City all night, they force a punt. I believe it's in the third quarter. And obviously, the ball touches one of the players on the punt return team. They get the ball deep in San Francisco territory. The next play, he hits MVS on that
Yep.
little switch route. Right there,
Is Valdez
it
Scantling.
woke up the team
Yep.
because they were sleepwalking. Look, San Fran was dealing with them, rushing the passer, slamming the run. The secondary was playing good. But after that, Patrick started going. Then he started going. And then when they drove the ball down the field and tied the score up before it went into overtime, there was a long 22-yard gain, I believe it was, to Travis Kelsey, where
Hmm.
Kelsey comes all the way across the field. They had him double teamed, and they still blew it. And the thing about Patrick was, when I'm sitting there watching, I was watching the tape this morning, I'm going, you know what? He wasn't perfect in this game at all. But if you give him enough in terms of making mistakes, he's going to capitalize on it. He's going to find it eventually. You can't let him hang around. And then that 4th and 1 in overtime, people, where they call timeout, they come out of there, and I remember we were in the booth going, they got to run it. They're going to give it to Pacheco. They're going to give it to someone. Rasheed
Yep.
Rice out of the backfield. I said, man, you're crazy. They're going to put Patrick in the gun, and they're going to run something with him out on the edge and let him figure it out. This is a $500 million quarterback. And when they put him in the gun and he ran that RPO and picked up the first down, I was like, that's it. There it is. He's going to figure out a way to get this ball down here and score. And that's exactly that was the play. Where on 4th down, most people were probably screaming, and he's going to mess this up. He's going to try and put him in gun. They ain't going to be able to pick up the first down. And he said, you know what? I'm going to ride the guy who has changed the game at this position. And Patrick figured it out.
We can't say the same for Brock Purdy, who did not play a bad game, who
Yeah.
was far from awful, but his crime was that against Patrick Mahomes, you needed to measure up. And when
Mm,
it counted, Patrick Mahomes stood taller than anybody else on the football field. What do we
mm.
make of Brock Purdy and San Francisco's performance in the aftermath of this loss?
Well, I'll tell you what. There's no question. Coming out in the second half, I think they went 3 straight 3-and-outs.
Yes.
Couldn't move the ball. They weren't running it. They kept trying to throw
Didn't
it.
have a
Brock
first
actually
down for a
missed.
quarter.
Right. But what wound up happening was he wound up getting them in a position to win the football game, okay, where he didn't have the ball last. Now, I will say this, in that overtime drive where they had to settle for the field goal, they had bad miscommunication on the offensive line where they turned Chris Jones scot-free.
Yep.
Scot-free. He has 2 guys wide open. He has Jawan Jennings wide open. He has Brandon Ayuk
And
wide
didn't
open.
have time to get it to him.
And couldn't get it to him, exactly. So I'm sitting there going, and I know the boy, I know he's going to make them throws. He was making them all night. But they turned loose their best defensive player. So therefore, they have to kick the field goal, and then they can't get off the field. In overtime, they can't get off the field. So what I sat there and I thought was this. Is this really about Brock not measuring up? Is it about breakdowns around him? There's enough blame to go around for San Francisco. I just said earlier today, they're going to be haunted by this game forever. They should have won that game.
Hmm.
They should have won that game. And I'm not going to sit here and say Brock didn't measure up to Patrick, but I will say this. Patrick figured out a way to win it in crunch time, aided by the fact that San Francisco played good for about 90% of that game, good enough to win it.
Hmm.
And in crunch time, they folded. They folded, and
Well,
you
listen,
can't
you
do that
couldn't get
against Patrick.
Kansas City. You couldn't keep Kansas City off the field because all you needed was a first down. You get a
Yeah.
first down, you run out the clock. You San Francisco, you win the Super Bowl championship. They couldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in overtime, you see, look, okay, so let's put it this way. In overtime, why did Kyle take the ball first?
Right. That was my next question.
How are the players talking about now they didn't know the rules in
They
overtime?
didn't know the rules.
How is that? Why wouldn't you give it to Patrick first and make them have to score a touchdown? And then you have the choice to then go back and say, hey, look, now, not only can we score, do we need to score,
2-point conversion.
And the 2-point conversion. We know exactly what we need to do.
Right.
Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, those are the kind of
I
things.
thought the only explanation, Lewis, was that they were gassed at the end of regulation because they were on the field for so long.
The defense, right.
And that he thought that there was no way they'd be able to stop them
Right.
because they were
That's
gassed
true.
in overtime. That's the only thing I can think of.
That's possible, and I said that in the booth. But for his players to come out and say, look, we never really even discussed this and went over this.
Wow.
We didn't even know. And then you have Chris Jones talking about the fact that we've been repping this since training camp.
Right.
This perfect scenario. Man, I'm telling you what. There are going to be some sleepless nights out there in Santa Clara for a long time because this was a total meltdown. They should have won that game, man. But you know what? Shoulda, coulda, woulda, whatever you want to call it. You let Patrick have enough time to figure it out. You let Andy have enough time to figure it out. You let Spags have enough time to figure out what's your pressure point where I can make you break and not be able to make a play. This is what's going to happen. You're going to lose to these guys. You got Hall of Fame people on this team. Hall of Fame coach, Hall of Fame quarterback. Hall of Fame tight end who made big plays when they needed him to. The result is what it is.
So now what do we say about Kyle Shanahan? 3 straight NFC titles.
Bro, I don't
title
know.
games, 4 title games, 4 NFC title games in the last 5 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances, no Super Bowl championship as a coach. And oh, by the way, when he was the offensive coordinator in Atlanta, they had a 28-3 lead.
Yep.
They lost that to Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, in part because they didn't run the football. They kept throwing it, which means an incomplete pass, stopping the clock and giving Brady and New England time to come back on you.
Mm-hmm.
Then he's the head coach in in San Francisco. They've got a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter against the against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yep.
They blew that. They have a 10-point lead in this game.
Yep.
And they blow that. What are we to make of Kyle Shanahan in light of those realities, combined with what you just finished saying about the sleepless nights that are going to obviously be provoked because of the outcome of this game?
Hey, man, what I say is this. Brilliant play caller, play designer. That's a great way of really jiving with his players, pulling out the best of them. But as far as being a game day, in-the-moment tactician, all the things that people used to beat Andy Reid down for, he's kind of showing some of them cracks now. And he's going to have to learn from them. Now, the question is, well, people are going to say, well, how long do you let him continue to learn on the job? Well, I mean, he's gotten his teams to 2 Super Bowls. He's had 10-point leads in both Super Bowls as head coaches. I mean, you going to fire him? No, you ain't going to fire him. But he's going to be one of those people who you're going to constantly go, is he good enough to get him over the hump with his strategizing in the moment? We don't know. So far, he's not. Now, I can tell you this. I know he didn't coach Colton McKivitz, the right tackle, to turn loose Chris Jones on third down and over. I know he ain't coaching that.
Mm-hmm. He ain't coached the guy in special teams to get the ball knocked off his back of the foot.
Exactly.
Or McLeod to not just drop on the football and cover it instead of trying to pick it up and run with it.
Exactly. He's not coaching that kind of stuff. But you know what? In the end, that stuff all filters up to the head coach, and he's going to be the one who has to answer for it. Because ultimately, he's in charge. And really, that's all we care about are the end results.
If the 49ers had won this game, I had Christian McCaffrey as the MVP. Would I have been wrong as opposed to Brock Purdy? Would I have been wrong?
If Brock had thrown a touchdown in overtime and say they win it, say they somehow are able to get Kansas City off the field, he had hit either Ayuk or Jennings there, I think he's gonna get it. I think he's going to get it in that moment because the ball was in his hands. He made the decision, and he put it on the right spot. Because he made some money throws now. He made some money throws. But at the same time, there were some times there, the 3 straight drives starting in the third quarter where he couldn't get anything going. Spags had him and had their pressure packages dialed up. But I think simply because the ball would have been in his hands in the last moments of the game, and it would have been the deciding points, I think he would have got it.